My cabin in the woods was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place to escape the corporate grind and just breathe. Little did I know, my escape would come with a gatekeeper from hell, a classic HOA Karen. It all started a few months after I bought the place. I was enjoying a quiet Saturday morning on my porch when a golf cart screeched to a halt on the dirt path near my property line. Out stormed a woman with a haircut you could set your watch by and an expression that could curdle milk. She jabbed a finger toward my brand new wood-fired hot tub. "That's a violation," she shrieked. I calmly stood up. "Excuse me. I'm Mark. I don't believe we've met." She scoffed. "I'm Sandra, the HOA president, and that tub is not up to code. It's an eyesore and a fire hazard. You have 48 hours to remove it or you'll be fined." I tried to explain that I had all the necessary permits and it was professionally installed, but she wasn't listening. She just repeated her threat and sped off. This became our little routine. The next week, it was my garden gnomes. Apparently, they were tacky and violated the aesthetic harmony of the community. Then it was the color of my mailbox, which was a shade too rustic for her liking. Each time I'd receive a formal, passive-aggressive notice slid under my door. I complied with the smaller things just to keep the peace, but the hot tub was my hill to die on. I sent the HOA board copies of my permits and the installation compliance report. I heard nothing back, so I assumed the matter was settled. I was wrong. One Friday evening I was hosting a small get-together with a few colleagues from my tech company. We were grilling, laughing, and getting ready to enjoy the hot tub. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights illuminated the woods. 2 police officers were walking up my driveway, looking as confused as I was. Behind them, beaming with smug satisfaction, was Sandra. She'd called the cops, claiming I was hosting a disruptive, unpermitted event. The officers were professional but clearly annoyed at the waste of time. They spoke with me, saw we were just a few friends having a quiet barbecue, and apologized for the intrusion. As they were leaving, one of them turned to Sandra and told her not to use 911 for known emergencies. Her face turned a shade of crimson I'd never seen before. She just stood there, fuming, as my guests watched in disbelief. One of my guests was my new project lead, a guy named David. He looked particularly uncomfortable. Her eyes. He sighed. "Yeah, that's my wife." The next day, I received an urgent email from the HOA. It was a summons to an emergency board meeting to discuss my repeated and flagrant violations. The email strongly implied that if I didn't show up, they would vote to place a lien on my property. This was war. I spent the rest of the weekend preparing. I gathered all my documents, the property deed, the permits, the inspector's reports, copies of every violation notice from Sandra, and even a statement from the company that installed the hot tub. The meeting was held in a small, stuffy community clubhouse. Sandra sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 other board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She started the meeting with a dramatic flair, listing my infractions like a prosecutor in a high-stakes trial. She painted me as a neighborhood menace, a rule-breaker who threatened the very fabric of their peaceful community. When she finally finished her tirade, she looked at me, a smirk playing on her lips. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" I calmly walked to the front and laid out my documents. I went through each accusation one by one, presenting the corresponding evidence that proved I was in full compliance. I showed them the approved permit for the hot tub. I pointed out the section in the HOA bylaws that said nothing about garden gnomes. I even had a paint swatch from the approved color palette that matched my mailbox perfectly. The other board members started looking uneasy, glancing at Sandra, whose smug expression was beginning to falter. I saved the best for last. "And regarding the police incident on Friday," I said, looking directly at Sandra, "it's concerning that the HOA president would misuse emergency services to harass a resident. It reflects poorly on this entire community." Her face went pale. That's when David, her husband and my colleague, chose to walk in. He looked nervous. He'd told me earlier that Sandra had forbidden him from coming, but he felt he had to. He stood at the back of the room, avoiding eye contact with his wife. I decided it was time to drop the bomb. I turned my attention back to the board. This constant harassment has started to impact my work life. It's stressful, and it's especially awkward because my company is all about collaboration and respect. Principles that seem to be lacking here. I paused for effect. It's just a strange coincidence that Sandra's husband David just started on my team at work. In fact, as the senior director for a new global expansion project, he reports directly to me. You could have heard a pin drop. Sandra froze. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted from me to her husband, who was now staring at the floor, wishing it would swallow him whole. The color drained from her face as the gears in her head turned. The man whose life she'd been making a living hell for weeks was her husband's new boss. The other board members were staring at her, their expressions a mix of shock and dawning realization. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely. Sandra suddenly found her voice, but it was just a weak stammer. "This meeting is adjourned." She practically fled the room, David trailing sheepishly behind her. The other board members quickly apologized to me, assuring me that all the fines would be dropped and I wouldn't be bothered again. And they were true to their word. From that day on, I never received another violation notice. I never saw Sandra's golf cart near my property again. My cabin was finally the peaceful sanctuary it was meant to be. Work was a little awkward for a week or two. David was incredibly apologetic. He confessed he had no idea she was going to such extremes and was embarrassed by her behavior. I told him to forget about it. Just make sure our project is a success, I said with a smile. And maybe keep the office drama and the home drama separate, he agreed. We ended up having a great working relationship. And every time I relax in my wood-fired hot tub, looking up at the stars, I can't help but smile. Sometimes, karma doesn't just knock on your door. It calls an HOA meeting and gets you a promotion. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.